Under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, two small puppies sat quietly beside a deserted bus stop. The air was cold, the pavement damp from an earlier drizzle, and the sound of distant engines faded into the night. Yet, the puppies remained there, unmoving, watching the road. Each night they appeared at the same hour, always in the same place. Passers-by began to notice them, whispering to one another about the strange pair who never begged or barked, but waited patiently, side by side, as if expecting someone who never came. The bus driver saw them first during his late route. Their small shapes stood out against the beam of his headlights. He slowed down once, thinking they might dart into the road, but they only lifted their heads and stared, their eyes shining like tiny lanterns in the dark. Night after night, they were there. Rain poured, winds howled, and still they came. The driver began to wonder who they were waiting for. He left scraps of food on the curb, but they never touched them until his bus disappeared down the hill. Then, quietly, they ate together before vanishing into the shadows. Curiosity turned into concern. The driver could not shake the image of those trembling bodies huddled beneath the metal bench. Finally, one evening after finishing his shift, he decided to stay behind. He parked his bus, took a flashlight, and followed the pair from a distance. The puppies did not notice him at first. They walked slowly along the empty road, paws splashing in shallow puddles, tails low but steady. The night was silent except for the soft rhythm of their tiny feet against the wet ground. The driver followed them past dark houses, toward the edge of the forest. After several minutes, the road ended near an old, collapsed bus shelter that had been abandoned for years. The driver remembered hearing that it had been damaged in a storm months ago. The puppies approached it cautiously, whining softly, circling the fallen roof. Then, from beneath the pile of broken wood, a faint sound came, a fragile, human voice calling out weakly. The driver froze. His flashlight flickered as he hurried forward, moving pieces of debris aside. There, half buried beneath the boards, lay a woman, pale and barely conscious. Her fingers clutched a small photograph, its corners worn and creased. The driver leaned closer and gasped when he saw it. The picture showed the same two puppies, smaller, healthier, sitting beside the woman on a sunny afternoon. The puppies barked and pawed at her sleeve, desperate for her to move. The driver immediately called for help. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens echoed through the trees. Paramedics arrived and carefully lifted the woman out from under the wreckage. The puppies stayed close, following every step. Even as she was placed inside the ambulance, they refused to leave. Their whimpers grew louder, their tails motionless, eyes fixed on her face. The driver picked them up gently and climbed in beside her. The road back to the hospital felt endless. When they arrived, the woman was taken into emergency care. The driver waited in the hallway, holding both puppies in his lap. Hours passed. Finally, a nurse approached with a smile, saying she would recover. The man sighed with relief, tears stinging his eyes. Later that morning, he was allowed to see her. The woman's eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding her weak voice. But when she saw the two familiar faces beside her bed, a faint smile formed. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch their fur. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered their names, Milo and Luna. The driver stepped back quietly, realizing he was witnessing something extraordinary, a bond so strong it had defied pain, fear, and even death. The next day, the story spread across town. People gathered at the bus stop to see the place where the two little heroes had waited. Some left flowers, others brought food and water bowls. The once empty stop became a symbol of devotion and hope. The driver continued his route every evening, but now he made one extra stop before finishing his shift. He parked by the same flickering streetlight and watched as two wagging tails greeted him happily, no longer lost, no longer waiting in vain. He smiled, understanding that in a world often too busy to notice small miracles, these two little lives had reminded everyone what true love looks like: patient, selfless, and never fading. Their story became a quiet legend whispered among locals, told in hushed voices under the same pale glow of the bus stop light. Each retelling carried the same lesson: love does not always speak loudly. Sometimes it simply waits, faithfully, until someone listens. If this story touched your heart, Share it with someone who believes in the power of kindness that never gives up. Because even in silence, love always finds its way home. Weeks passed, and the woman recovered slowly. The doctor said she had been trapped beneath the collapsed shelter for nearly 3 days before the puppies found the courage to lead help to her. No one could explain how they had survived the cold or known exactly where to find the bus driver. The driver began visiting her every evening after his shift, bringing food for Milo and Luna. The small hospital room filled with warmth each time they bounded toward her bed, tails wagging in joy. The nurses called them the Miracle Twins, and even patients from other rooms came to watch their reunion. One afternoon, the woman told the driver her story. She had lived alone near the edge of town, rescuing abandoned animals. The puppies were the last two she had found before the storm destroyed her home. When the shelter collapsed, she could only pray someone would find them before it was too late. Tears filled the driver's eyes as she spoke. He realized that for all the nights he saw them waiting at the bus stop, they were not lost, they were guiding him. They knew only one person came that late at night. Somehow, they remembered the rumble of his bus and trusted he would understand. When the woman was finally discharged, the driver offered to take her home. But when they arrived at the ruins of her shelter, she stood silently before the debris. Instead of sadness, she smiled faintly and turned toward him. Home, she said, is wherever they are. From that day on, she and the puppies moved into a small cottage near the bus depot. The driver often stopped by after his route, sometimes bringing warm food or new toys for Milo and Luna. In return, they greeted him with joyful barks and playful jumps, their happiness filling the quiet evening air. The bus stop that once looked empty now had a small wooden bench painted in bright colors, placed there by townspeople who had heard the story. They named it the waiting place. Every week, visitors came to leave flowers or notes about loved ones they missed. It became a place of remembrance and hope. The driver often sat there late at night, watching the lights fade in the distance. Milo and Luna sometimes joined him, curling up at his feet, their eyes half closed in peace. Under the same flickering light where their story began, he finally understood that some waits are never in vain. They lead us exactly where we are meant to be. As the years passed, the story of the two puppies who waited at the bus stop became a legend shared far beyond their small town. People from distant places came to see them, to touch the bench, to feel the quiet strength of their loyalty. News outlets called it the miracle of the midnight stop. Yet for those who truly knew them, it was not a miracle. It was love, simple, unwavering, and pure. And each time the bus driver looked into their eyes, he remembered the night two tiny lives taught him what devotion truly meant. Love, after all, does not always rush or demand attention. Sometimes it simply waits, patiently, until someone decides to follow. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it. Let it remind the world that even the smallest hearts can lead us toward the greatest acts of kindness. Because love that waits is love that never fades.